In this video, I decided to give some more pertinent examples on inverse of functions, but I recommend my previous video on inverse of function for some kinds of fundamental understanding. Let's take a look at some few examples here. But mind you that finding inverse of function have the same concept irrespective of any kinds of question or any given function we have. The instruction here says find the inverses of the following functions. The first question is if f of x equal to 2 cos x. F of x is y, so this equation can be written as y equal to 2 cos x. And then we need to bring in the concept of finding inverse of functions. And the concept is switch y for x and then make y the subject of the equation. And then the next thing is switching y for x. So this becomes x equal to 2 cos y. But it is more comfortable if it is written as 2 cos y equal to x. It's still basically the same thing. But it's more comfortable for you to make y the subject of the equation if it is written this way. So 2 cos y equal to x. And then the next step we want to take is to divide both sides by the coefficient of cos y, which is 2. So doing that brings us cos y equal to x over 2. And then if you want to make y the subject of the equation in this case, we've got to move this cos, the cosine there, to the other side of equality sign. And that changes to the cos inverse. So our y equal to the cos inverse of x over 2. So this is basically the inverse of the given function. But we've got to use the denotation of inverse of function. And therefore, the inverse of the given function is the cos inverse of x over 2. Let's take a look at another example. In this question, we are given f of x equal to sine x minus pi over 4. We need to be conscious of the fact that the x minus pi over 4 is a single term there. And that's why it's enclosed in the brackets. So if f of x equal to sine x minus pi over 4, the next thing we want to write is f of x equal to y. So our y is equal to sine of x minus pi over 4. And then we bring in the techniques or the concept of finding the inverse of function itself, which is switch y for x and then make y the subject of the equation. And then this becomes x equal to sine y minus pi over 4. And then we can just write it out as sine y minus pi over 4 equal to x. They're still basically the same thing, just that it's more convenient or more comfortable to make y the subject of the equation if it's written this way. And then the next step is y minus pi over 4 equal to sine inverse of x. That is when sine inverse is moved to the other side of the equality sign, and then it becomes the sine inverse of whatever terms you have there. So in this case, we move minus pi over 4 to the other side of the equality sign. So that becomes y equal to the sine inverse of x plus pi over 4. And this is basically the inverse of the given function. Then we've got to use the denotation of the inverse of a function. So basically, the inverse of a function is the sine inverse of x plus pi over 4. Let's take a look at another beautiful examples. In this question, we are given f of x to be e raised to the power of 3x plus 1 minus 5. Just like we know, f of x equal to y. So it's better written as y equal to e raised to the power of 3x plus 1 minus 5. And then the next step we want to take is to bring in the concept of finding inverse of function itself. That is, switch y for x and then make y the subject of the equation. So we want to switch y for x here. And then that becomes x equal to e raised to the power of 3y plus 1 minus 5. Then we've got to move minus 5 to the other side of equality sign. And that becomes x plus 5 equal to e raised to the power of 3y plus 1. And then here we have e raised to the power of 3y plus 1 equal to x plus 5. It's still the same thing. But just like what I explained in the previous solution, that it is more convenient or more comfortable if it's written this way to make y the subject of your equation. And then we have a problem at hand here. Here is an exponential function of 3y plus 1 equal to x plus 5. How do we get rid of this exponential function? One of the things we can do is to take the natural logarithm of both sides. So taking natural logarithm of both sides, that gives us the ln e raised to the power of 3y plus 1 equal to the natural logarithm of x plus 5. And then we've got to recall one of the properties or laws of logarithm in this case. Okay, if we have this kind of equation with respect to logarithm, and then the power becomes a coefficient to be multiplied by the given logarithm. And in this case, we have 3 plus 1, which is the power, multiplied by the natural logarithm of an exponential function, is equal to ln x plus 5. But we need to take note that the natural logarithm of e is equal to 1. And then, in this case, our 3y plus 1 multiplied by 1 equal to the ln x plus 5. Just like we all know, whatever we multiply by 1 will be equal to the term itself. And then we have 3y plus 1 equal to the natural logarithm of x plus 5. And then moving 1 to the other side of equality sign, that becomes 3y equal to ln x plus 5 minus 1. And then we've got to divide both sides by the coefficient of y, which is 3. So dividing both sides by 3, that gives us y equal to ln x plus 5 minus 1 all over 3. But we've got to use the denotation of inverse of function, which is basically the same thing as y there. So the inverse of the given function is ln x plus 5 minus 1 all over 3. That is the question to the given, that is the answer to the given question. Let's take a look at another example. In this question, we are given f of x equal to 2x plus 5, everything over 3x minus 1. So the first thing you want to do is to write f of x as y. So this becomes y equal to 2x plus 5, everything over 3x minus 1. And then we need to bring in a concept of finding inverse of function itself, which is switching y for x and then looking for a way of making y the subject of the equation. So we've got to switch y for x here. So x becomes 2y plus 5, everything over 3y minus 1. And I think the right step to take here is to do cross multiplication. So if you cross multiply your terms you have there, you're definitely going to have x into bracket 3y minus 1 equal to 2y plus 5. And then we need to open up the bracket. That becomes x times 3y equal to 3xy minus x times 1 equal to x equal to 2y minus plus 5. And then we want to rearrange so that we can have all the terms that contains y in one side. And that becomes 3xy, moving plus 2y to the other side of equality sign, that becomes minus 2y. And then moving minus x to the other side of equality sign, that becomes positive x. So we're having 3xy minus 2y equal to 5 plus x. And then we want to use y to factorize the left hand side of the equation. So that gives us y into bracket 3x minus 2 equal to x plus 5. We're using y to factorize the left hand side because y is our target. That is, y is to be made the subject of the equation. And then the next step is we want to divide both sides by whatever we have as the coefficient of y, which is 3x minus 2. Doing that, we're going to have y equal to x plus 5 divided by 3x minus 2. And this is basically the inverse of the function. But we've got to use the denotation of inverse of a function there. Therefore, the inverse of our function is x plus 5 over 3x minus 2. Let's take a look at the final example I have in the video. If f of x equal to x squared minus 4, then f of x needs to be written as y. And therefore, we have y equal to x squared minus 4. This is a very pretty easy example. And then we want to switch y for x in this case. And then we have x equal to y squared minus 4. But it's better written as y squared minus 4 equal to x. And therefore, moving minus 4 to the other side of equality sign, that brings us into y squared equal to x plus 4. And of course, the square on the left hand side, when you move it to the left and to the right hand side, that automatically becomes square roots of whatever you have or whatever terms you have on the right hand side. And therefore, we have y equal to square root of x plus 4. But it is etiquette in mathematics when you are finding square root of any time, it can be positive and it can be negative. Hence, then the input of positive or negative of square root of your terms there. And then this is basically the inverse of the given function. but we're going to use the denotation of inverse of a function, and therefore the inverse of the given function is the plus or minus square root of x plus 4. That is the answer to such a question. Thanks for watching. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channels.